Hello, and welcome to Returning to Us, a podcast that gives you strategies and tips for how to hack your brain, build and strengthen relationships, and to teach people how to recognize and neutralize their emotional states. I'll discuss emotional intelligence and regulation, how food and exercise impact the body and brain, and share lessons from my own lived experiences. I'm Lauren Spiegelmeier, the founder of the Behavior Hub, which is an organization that works to reduce the stressors of raising and educating children through a brain and biology-based lens. In these episodes, I'll share stories and strategies from my own life, work, and research, answer listener questions, and wrap it up with a try-it-at-home tip. Decades worth of information in just minutes. You ready? Hey all, today we are going to change it up a little bit. Instead of me speaking, I brought on a very special guest to chat with us all about behavior and the brain. So with me today is Catherine Dennis, who is an early childhood specialist, adjunct faculty, and mom of 7. So welcome, Catherine.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Pleasure to have you. So I think a great way to start is for you to just tell us a little bit more about who you are, what you do, and wherein your passion lies.
Well, that's kind of a long story. I'll kind of try to keep it brief, but, being a mom of 7, it's challenging as in of itself, but I was also a foster mom and adopted 2 children, and, dealing with children that didn't have my DNA and the way that they needed to be parented were going to be different than the children that I have. So just walking that walk, I was traditionally educated in elementary education, but as I stayed home with all of my kids, and because I wanted to give them that strong foundation, I started thinking about the single mom or the parent that needed to drop their child off and was really nervous. And so I did a pivot and switch when it was time to go back to work, but also simultaneously was going through a divorce after 24 years of marriage. So was tragic for me, and I was handing adverse childhood experiences to my 7 children. So became director of an early childhood center while I was getting my master's, and then decided to go on to get my EDS and principal licensure so I could take all this work that I learned about trauma and create a trauma, help support trauma-informed practices. And I think the pivotal moment, besides going through my own personal tragedy, was watching a little boy against the wall of a school in the lower grades with a teacher standing above him, yelling at him to try to correct his behavior. And I remember my heart shattered in a million pieces because I knew that this was happening everywhere. I knew that this is what most people thought that they should do to get behavior to change. Behavior management charts, or adults being bigger than little kids. And I realized, especially after dealing with the fallout of a divorce with 7 children, the manifestation of trauma in children comes in really interesting ways. The behaviors, I'm sick, I don't want to go to school, hiding, doing all these things that my old self would be like, you just need to get in the car, you just need to go to school, just strong-arming them into doing what they're supposed to do, because my perspective was, you're fine. But really understanding that trauma changes the brain, and it changes the way that that architecture is, it changes the way that they behave, and just really having to have that understanding. So going back to that day when I watched that little boy and that teacher, I saw my son against the wall. I saw my friend's sons against the wall, or my daughter against the wall. They're both minorities, and I knew I needed to. I knew I needed to learn more, and I needed to do more, and I needed to understand more. So in my role as education coordinator in Head Start, I was picked, beautiful, I don't know, it was wonderful, as the trauma coach. I was trained for a year to understand the brain and to be able to make those changes in instructional practices in the classroom, to be able to help teachers regulate their own emotions, to understand mirror neurons and their affect and how their affect can impact the children. It could also trigger the kiddos. So it was wonderful. I worked at Lincoln High School as well, with the hardest of the hard kids, and had success, all because I started to understand the brain and what they needed to actually learn and to move them from the flooded system to the clear, to that executive function, that prefrontal lobe. That's what made me passionate, as I knew that we needed to overhaul this, and it's a huge work. And I didn't want to see any more kids against the wall with big adults staring down at them. That's it in a nutshell. How I became passionate. And in my adjunct work, like I told you before, I don't ever teach a class without touching on the subject. I feel like I would be disingenuous to let them have the idea that they're going to go to a classroom that's going to fit this kind of like ideal of 20 children sitting at circle time, crisscross applesauce, listening to everything that they say. It doesn't happen that way. When I began teaching in we're not going to say the date, because if I say 19 or something, just saying 19 instead of 2000 makes me old. But the demographic in my classroom, I had one child that was from a divorced home. One. Now, fast forward in my adjunct work and when I was teaching preschool or different things, the demographic, there's over 50% of my kiddos came from, over 50% of broken, families where there's two houses, And I'll never forget being in a Head Start classroom, and one little girl was talking about two houses, and another little girl was listening in a confused way. And I remember swooping in and sitting down and saying, I have two houses too. We have two houses. Tell me what your two houses look like. At that moment, I realized that my own tragedy, my own thing that I had gone through was suddenly going to lend credibility to my work. It's not that I wish tragedy on other people, but no longer did my students look at me as a white middle-class woman that had it all together. They looked at me as, I lived in poverty. I took a bus. I put kids on my back, pregnant, walking with a stroller to my OB appointments. Suddenly, that lends credibility to your work, and it gave me great empathy instead of only sympathy. It was allowed me to have compassion for these kiddos rather than just feeling sorry for them. So that's how it all started.
No, I think that what I've learned about people in this area, people that work with stress and trauma in the brain, is that they usually have the passion behind it usually comes from lived experience. And when it can come from lived experience, like you said, you switch from that sympathetic view to that empathetic view. And I think healing takes place much quicker. It's much more sustainable when we empathize with people that are struggling instead of just feeling sorry for them. So I think that's huge.
Real quick, when I was being taught about the trauma-informed practices through St. Luke's Critterton Psychiatric Hospital, the woman that would come out to teach me once a month, beautiful woman, poised, classy, the whole year she taught me, never once shared a personal story. At the end, when we concluded, I asked her to come to my house, wanted to get together and chit-chat, because you grow close to somebody that teaches you these things. Not one time did she tell us that her husband, and she was a mental health professional, her husband had committed suicide and left her a voicemail, and she went home and found him in the driveway. So her healing and her work in this was also the same way, that she held this deep, painful scar, but she appeared to have it all together and to standing up there and teaching us all this. One would never know. I thought it was all coming from an intellectual, kind of point of view, but instead she'd walk through that. She had walked through it in a deep, deep way, and so I was always moved by that. It always also inspired me to share my story when I could. I can't always share my story, but how powerful it is for someone to know that I've been there. I was raised Catholic. You don't get divorced. And I was divorced with 7 children. And you know about ACEs, and you just basically handed your children on a silver platter, something you said you never would do. So it doesn't matter your socioeconomic background or where you come, who you are. ACEs have things like that. They don't pick and choose,
Absolutely. That's
So
heartbreaking. And I know from the work, from what we know about the brain and the body, especially that holding on to all of those stressors, the weight, the trauma, like it just robs your energy and deteriorates different parts of your body because your body's just not meant to hold on to those things. So I can only imagine what she was going through. I know I can empathize with what others are going through. And I think the biggest thing that I say, and it came up for me when you were speaking, is we see these kids acting out, or these challenging kids, or maybe not kids, maybe it's adults. And when someone acts a certain way that we don't like, we automatically seem to go into a very judgmental state. But if we stopped and always tried to ask ourselves or get curious, maybe, I wonder why they are acting that way, we would be able to respond so much better and we get a lot more answers. Like I think about the kid in the wall, and I think about like certain scenarios and situations that you've described. If we had just gotten curious and asked ourselves, I wonder why they're acting that way. I wonder what happened this morning. I wonder what's going on in their lives. It would be huge.
It would. I always tell teachers that struggle, one of the biggest needs is, one of the biggest asks are, behaviors, challenging behaviors in the day work that I do, challenging behaviors. I say to the teachers, you have to switch from teacher to detective. You have to switch from teacher to scientist. If you cannot get that child in his executive function, you can throw all your school readiness goals out the window. Yep. You can throw all your social emotional learning out the window until you figure out what's happened, what's going on to figure out what that all behavior is communication. What does this child need? Does he need safety? The simplest way I can kind of explain that is the child that doesn't want to leave the mother, okay, and it's drop off in a preschool or school situation. The child's leaving, holding on to the mom, crying, and the teacher swoops in and says, "You're fine. Come on, honey. You're fine. Come on, honey. You're fine." And then the child's still crying, and the teachers continue to say, "You're fine." Well, I always say that child's trying to tell you something, okay? So if we're not going to look at the child crying and holding on to mom, we're thinking, okay, foster child, doesn't want to leave mom, scared that nobody's going to come back for him, okay? So what do we need to do? Let's ask the parent, do you think you could bring something from home that child's attached to, that child could connect to? Instead of trying to tell that child that child's fine, that child's not fine, because it's always the child's perspective, right? It's not the adult perspective. That's strong arming. You're going to be fine because I know I'm an adult and I know somebody's going to pick you up. That's not how the child sees that. I mean, when we were little, remember we would see a hill and the hill would be huge. Yeah. And how are we going to climb up that hill? It's huge. And then as an adult, we go back to that hill and we're like, dude, that hill was barely, So, I mean, it's the same thing. It's like when that child's crying, and throwing a fit, people always say he's trying to manipulate me or he's trying to this. Okay, there might be some of that in a typically developing child, but a child that's experienced trauma, we have to look deeper. And so it's really given teachers permission to kind of flip the script and say, oh, he's not doing this. He's not trying to make my life terrible. I need to actually figure out what's going on. Again, 2-generational thing. We gotta have that strong relationship with the parent, and we gotta see what that parent needs to feel more confident in their skills. We have to connect with them. We have to let them know what a gift their child is. We have to work with them, and then we work together. Work together. I've seen it with my own eyes, and teachers have said to me, you had the patience to see this through. I do, because I love the child. I've seen a child that wouldn't stay in his car seat, flips over the front seat, turns on all the things in the car. The grandfather says, I can't get the child to sit in his car. Comes in, throws blocks off the thing. Draws blood from me. He's the one nobody wants in the classroom. The commitment that I had to that child and to trauma-informed practices, I literally, as a scientist or a detective, saw that child go from the flooded state to that brain, that executive function. I saw it happen, and he could sit and do the 5-frame, and he could sit then in the car seat, and he never had a preschool experience. He came at 5, and we're like, oh my gosh, this child has to go to kindergarten. It's a success story because it just took safety and connection. needed someone to provide. I always say a river is hemmed in by its banks. We can't get a river to the ocean, right? The river needs to go to the ocean. They need that loving guidance.
Mm-hmm.
Loving guidance. Someone that's I'm going to be here for you. You can kick and scream. I got you. I'm not going to talk to you while you're flooded. I'm not going to give you a lecture. I got you. We're going to get you to do that 5-frame. And we did. And it does take a commitment. It takes a village. It doesn't just say, here's your toolbox. Go ahead, teacher. I know you're going to struggle. That's not going to work either. We have to start with taking care of our teachers and teaching them how to take good care of themselves. Not just wake up in the morning and drink your lemon water. Take good care of yourself so that when you come to school and you do the work, that when you go home at night and you've had 15 dysregulated children, you're going to be like, I was so successful.
Yeah.
You're never going to get rid of dysregulated children. They're always going to show up in your classroom. But what you're going to be able to do is my response to them and the validation of what they're going through was a gift to them. And tomorrow we can start again. They don't need a big adult over them, giving them a secondary trigger with their strong arming. They need someone that just allows that floodedness. And when they're done, there's accountability. We all know that. People think, they're not accountable. They don't have to clean up the blocks. No, we always clean up the blocks together. We have a great time. We enjoy one another and we fix we restore what we did, but not when they're flooded.
Yep, I completely
passionate about this. I'm almost off my seat.
Well, there's something that you said. I have a feeling that some people are going to be curious about. I'm looking to put it in the show notes, but maybe you can just expand on. I think 5-frame.
Oh, the 5-frame. It's a math. It's just a math. Like it's something you would do with a child with math. Like a 5-frame. Show me 2 in the 5-frame. So they would put 2 things in a 5-frame. It's just a math. A math activity. You can't do it if you're flooded.
Yeah.
You're going to throw the little beads that you're supposed to put in the little squares, right? So if you're flooded, or you might eat them, So, if you have a dysregulated child trying to do an executive function activity, they're going to grab everybody else's next to them. They're going to flip over the reason why I say that is because a specific instance that I was thinking about, all the students were sitting down with their cookie sheets, and on their cookie sheets was the 5-frame, and then they have magnets, and the teacher will show them, 2 dots, and they'll show me 2, and then they would put 2 on the 5-frame. That's an executive function activity.
Gotcha. I was thinking that when you said it, I was like, this is some type of self-regulation strategy I've never heard of before.
We can make that up, Lauren. We can do that.
We can turn it into one.
Yeah, we can do 5-frame breathing. Give me 2 breaths. We might have some hyperventilating children.
No, it's a great point that I'm glad I asked, because it made me think too, is like we talk about how kids can't listen, they can't respond, they can't communicate, they can't do things when they are stuck in their emotional brain. They have to get back into their thinking brain. And there's this hand signal. It's out of Dan Siegel's work. Georgetown University took it and brought it way down to the level of a child. But I talk about this almost every time I have the opportunity to be on any type of stage. And it's so important that we understand that when kids are in their emotional brain, and we'll call your thumb your emotional brain, we call it the barking dog. So it barks when you're upset. Yeah. And then your fingers on the top are your prefrontal cortex, and it's your thinking brain. So that's the executive functioning. So what happens is when a child gets upset, when the child's like crawling over the seat, flipping over the seat, turning on, his dog's barking or her dog's barking. And when that's happening, it scares away the wise owl. So in order for that child to get back in the seat, we can't redirect, give consequences because their dog is barking. You can't even hear those things. You have to get the dog to stop barking first, and then the wise owl can come back, and then they can hear what you're saying, and then they can be redirected. So I think we have that process backwards, where when kids are acting out, when there's tantrums, we're trying to almost suffocate the barking dog. Like, stop barking. It's not sustainable. It doesn't work well. It just gets the dog to bark more, and the dog's trying to fight you off of it. So
it's so true. It's so true. And I say it to adults all the time. I always say, okay, think of something in your life. Like you get a notice on your app right away that you've overdrawn your account by $1,500 and you have no idea what happened. And you're looking at that and you're freaking out. Yeah. And, your account's been hacked. And then someone comes and asks you a question about something and and you need to answer them. You can't simultaneously do 2 things. One that what day are we going on vacation? I can't, we can't do those things. Or if, you've experienced a death or grief or something big. I always ask people, think of something big. And what if you had to balance your checkbook during that time? Or what if you had to write a paper during that time? You wouldn't be able to simultaneously do something with your executive function while you're going through those hard times. And we're asking children to do it on the daily.
Yeah.
We're asking children to do it on the daily. Come, sit down, don't wiggle, be present, open your brain and learn. And I also say to the things, put away your cell phone, don't touch your pen, don't take a sip of your water. We're asking little children to do things that are unthinkable as adults. So really, take a deep breath, a collective sigh, and ask yourself, how can I do this different, where I'm not creating these problems by putting these unrealistic expectations on these little kiddos that have that barking dog constantly,
yep,
or are around a dysregulated adult all morning, and that's all they witnessed. And so they have gone quiet, and all they've seen all morning are two parents or one parent that can't regulate. Mirror neurons are powerful, right? That's going to come up somewhere. I always talk, I have a grandson, and it always takes me back when I'm watching him get tired. And I used to do this all the time. When they would get tired, I would get irritated that they would get tired. And then, I couldn't get them down for nap. And then things would just kind of spiral. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, can't get my kids down for nap, blah, 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 blah. And so I'm thinking to myself, I'm the adult here. And I always tell my son and my daughter-in-law, go lower. Don't go higher. Go lower. Don't match the affect. Go way down. Because I made the mistake early on. My oldest is 30 of just being that bigger adult with a bigger voice. You do, and then it would increasingly frustrate. That's our natural response as a human. And to be able to give parents that skill now, I have so many platforms that I'm able to share those types of things with parents, whether it's my writing or, training or things like that. If there's one thing I could say to them is don't match the dysregulated child's affect. Go lower and realize if that child's tired, you're not going to get what you want from that child. So get them to bed before they're tired. Mm-hmm. Respond to the misbehavior before it's going to happen. Know the triggers. Is it the transition? Is it going home? I remember being teaching in Lincoln High School, and I remember a 3-day weekend coming up, and it would be a little bit rowdy in the classroom, and I would just be like, what? A little more, it's a little different in high school when students get rowdy than in preschool. I have a broad perspective. I've taught all the grades, but and I remember saying to them, have a great 3-day weekend, enjoy your weekend. And most of them said, we hate 3-day weekends. We don't get food. Mm-hmm. We have to find a place to stay. Yep. Couch surfing. So, all kids, doesn't matter what age or stage, have that ability to dysregulate and to, it just looks different, but realizing that my adult perspective isn't always the winner, it's the child or the young adults. I'm thinking, 0 to 17, 20, maybe sometimes,
A good point too about going lower. I think with a lot of things, with maybe everything, is if we can think in opposites, there's our systems work in opposites. Like the nervous system has the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, and there's all this Zen Buddhism, yin and yang. And if we can keep that in mind, even to ourselves, when you're stressed out, do something that's slow, stretching, mindfully have a tea or a coffee, or eat something really slow, do the opposite of what you're feeling. Or if it's with kids, do the opposite probably of what you think you should do or want to do. But
right.
Opposites seem to really balance us out. And that universally makes sense.
One of my greatest preschool teachers who really took on to the trauma-informed practices when I was coaching her, when she would be outside with the children, so energy is up. Mm-hmm. And notoriously, when you transition, there's going to be dysregulated behavior. And then when they come in, if their energy is up, it's going to take a while for them to settle. Yep. So we have this upregulated energy. So whenever you transition, she would come in and they would do yoga. So that would be the opposite. And then they would go into small group or into the interest areas and things like that, so that she could downregulate their systems so that they could handle the appropriate, play, rather than going right into small group and you've got kids that are wiggling or whatever. And one of the most beautiful things that she did was during the yoga practice, they would put their hands on their heart and they would say, I am safe. I am safe. I am safe.
Give me the chills.
Yeah, and to walk in and to watch 4 and 5-year-olds holding their hearts and telling them they were safe and down regulating and getting ready to do executive function activities so that they could learn was, how you feel like you could just die? Like, I feel like I could just die right now because I feel like she's got it. This teacher has it. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the class tool.
No.
It's measurement of teacher-child interactions, and Head Start uses it. It's actually birth to secondary. They have this tool, and it measures the teacher-child interactions, and I love it. And I'm class reliable, so I go in and I would give scores. She had almost a perfect score, and that does not happen because those interactions. We want positive student outcomes, and her interactions really created those strong positive outcomes cognitively, physically, social emotionally. And it was kind of one of those things when you feel like, as a trauma-informed practitioner, instructional coach, that kind of thing, you feel like if every teacher could make this kind of connection to the brain, as I'm a scientist, detective first, and then I'm a teacher, because teaching can't happen unless children are in the right brain state. And if they would change their practice, I feel like the world would change. Yeah. I feel like the world would change, because then we would have the problem, though, that children would be teaching parents, because we would have all these self-regulated children. And, I'll have a little child when I was in program come past my door. Teacher Catherine, I did the balloon breath and I breathed and I made it all better when I was mad at my friend, or whatever, to have them tell me that they, crossed the midsection, or that they took a deep breath. I took a belly breath and that made it better. You just go and you're just like, they're getting it.
Winning. Yes.
Yeah. Longitudinally, this is a life skill. Breathe the rest of your life. I'm teaching adults in my class how to breathe.
Yeah.
The first thing we do is we breathe. I'm teaching them about the ACE study, because they're going to go into the classroom and they're going to be pretty shocked when they see that not everybody's going to sit crisscross applesauce. There are going to be little ones that are 4 and 5 that are going to throw chairs or throw books or throw toys or scratch or kick or hit. It's not, back in the day, it's called Romper Room. I know you probably don't know. I was on Romper Room when I was a little girl. This kind of like cute little preschool experience where we're all just playing together and nobody says bad things or nobody does, hurts one another. It can be a scary, preschool can be a scary place for a teacher, but they're the gateway. They're the ones that are there to provide that safe, secure connection, because the brain's beautiful. I mean, the architecture, we have neuroplasticity. It can change. Just because there's an X doesn't mean a child is destined to have a mental health issue or destined to be a behavior problem. But that little one that, doesn't have those good role models, or that one caring adult, that early intervention is so critical, and having regulated teachers that are taking care of themselves.
Absolutely. Across
the spectrum.
Yeah. I think the best, like the I am safe, like it should be known, like that's not just either for also for anyone, like adults, children, 5-year-old, trauma, non-trauma, like for a child to tell themselves that they're safe, like that's a regulating practice. And I think a lot of these things that we're talking about, they're very useful in dealing with kids with high trauma exposure, any trauma exposure, or chronic stress. But these are practices that every child, every adult needs to have and learn, understand, and use, because it's just learning to regulate your emotions, use your brain, your human biology for you instead of against you. And I think sometimes people are like, oh, well, I don't have trauma, or I never had trauma, or, my child's never. these are skills everyone needs. There's self-regulation, emotional regulation skills. We aren't just born with these. We might have an advantage in developing them based on genes and epigenome, but we need to all learn these things and apply them.
I think the sad thing is, it's kind of like, I call them cheesy memes. There's cheesy memes out there that say self-care, or there's cheesy memes out there that say these things that we need to do, drink water, and read them, and it registers, drink water. Yeah, that's good for us. But really, truly, we have to imprint these. It's kind of like people that are, ready to be converted or whatever it is. I call this my conversion. I wasn't ready to hear this until I was ready to hear it. I heard it, but I was not ready to take it in a way that it moved my heart. Once I saw that little boy, I was learning it. I was being asked to do curriculum, to do this, to do that. But until I really kind of had that conversion of heart to realize that we're all trying to go around, big people, trying to get kids to behave, but we're not listening and we're not understanding what's going on. And if we want to create strong, resilient communities, we have to do this work. We have to do this work because we don't have the standard North American family anymore. We don't have mom and dad. We don't have everything looking the same. We have to as a community have that compassion and that understanding. And as schools, we have to do better. Yeah. As educators, we have to do better. And it's a huge pendulum shift. It's moving along a continuum. I don't believe we ever arrive. I think we need to always be continuing to do the work and to study and to understand the brain, because as humans, we default to what's easiest.
We sure do. Mm-hmm. Yep. And we look for those quick fixes. What's easy? How can I get this done faster? Instead of just being curious and present. So,
yep. And I've learned through the pandemic, there's power in the pause. And, and I think of that with my Zoom trainings that I do, giving people space to think and to process when I'm doing trainings, but also too for myself, telling myself as a practice, there's power in the pause and not reacting, but taking time to respond, to understand, to be curious, to ask those questions. I only have 2 kids left at home out of the 7. And one thing that I've practiced in the global pandemic, because when you're working full time and teaching, mm-hmm. and you have 2 students around the table that you need to make sure that they're doing their work, that can challenge someone, even with resources. I can't even imagine not having coping skills. So I always tell myself there's power in the pause. Before you go out there and find someone on their PlayStation and not on their class Zoom, there's power in the pause and taking a deep breath and going lower, not higher, not matching, their energy. So this is good for everyone. It's good for everyone.
Awesome. And you ended up answering some of the next questions I was going to ask about rethinking behavior and what does that mean, and the systems change and what does that look like. So we kind of talked a lot about what that looks like and what does that mean and what do we want to see. But what are some things that maybe parents or teachers or both could do to get us closer to these like not even just reactive regulatory practices, but using them preventatively, using them every day?
I think it starts, from the top, from the leaders. I suppose that's why I got my principal licensure, because I thought, we can't expect one teacher in 4th grade to be doing these mindfulness practices or whatever in their classroom. We have to give teachers permission to do things differently. And as leaders, we have to really stand up for what we know in science and what we need to do. And we need to make schools that support this. Not just in the classroom, but just to say, parents too, this is what we're doing. This is how we're responding. And I often say, and I always challenge the middle school teachers when they would apply these discipline things, what do you want to accomplish? What's your why? You want a 6th grader that's in class paying attention. So is the suspension going to work? Is in-school suspension going to work? Are these things going to get that child to be intrinsically motivated to behave? No, instructional practices need to change. That child's struggling with X, Y, or Z. So I'm challenging your policies around behavior. What is your ultimate goal? You want kids that are learning, kids that are excited, and middle school stuff. I would constantly always challenge him. I bet you he's glad that my kids are out of school. But, what's your why behind this? Yeah. What's your why? It's punitive. It's not changing behavior. I want to see behavior change. You have to do it different. It has to be done different. And you need supports. You need guidance, because it feels weird to do things different. Anything that's uncomfortable, it challenges our brains, it challenges us, feels strange. And we're used to what we're used to. And so every handbook has a behavior policy. But I challenge administrators to look at it differently, to say, do we need mentorship? Do we need different types of classrooms for people, boy or girl, that need to move more? Mm-hmm. Do we need accommodations for that in this middle school, so we don't have in-school suspensions 16 times through the year, and then the child doesn't get to go on their field trip at the end of the year because they were goofy, or they ask why they were goofy. What do they need? What do they need that's different to settle their brain down? Yeah. It just takes rethinking things, and it takes a group of people that care enough about the end result to make small changes. But one teacher in the corner of a building is not enough. It's systems changes. Yep. If we don't do anything, we fragment. We want to do it all together, so we moving the ship forward. Yep. Takes everybody.
I love that. And there's so much value in that. And I think too, the why, the motivation, if we can give people the why, if admin knows the why and they can understand the teacher's why, and we can connect those why, people have motivation to make these changes. Otherwise we're just passing information down and we're not motivated, or we don't see the reasoning behind using it. So I think it's a great, great point. I'm curious, I know this is a question that people always ask me is, what are some practices that you use in your own life to regulate yourself or with your kids, or to start putting these changes in place?
Well, first of all, I have totally and completely, this will be a cheesy meme again, I take really good care. I take really good care of myself. I drink water. I move. It's been challenging sitting in front of this computer, but I try to get in. I have a workout. I eat well. I see people coming to work with a 32-ounce big gulp of Mountain Dew and a white powdered donut. I just want to say, I love you. I love everything about you, but you're not going to feel well because it's science. You're not going to feel well. I'm not judging what you're eating, but I take pretty good care of myself. I'm old, and I can run with the young ones. But I laugh a lot. I laugh at myself. I give grace. I pause. I meditate. I breathe. Breathing resets me consistently, and I breathe throughout the day because I'm no different than anybody else. I have fiery arrows shooting at me. I'm a single mom. I've got tons of stuff to do. I've got a mortgage. I've got everything. I breathe. Breathing resets me. And I think one of the most powerful things that I do is I'm profoundly grateful to be able to do what I'm doing and to make an impact in the world. So I feel like gratitude, this is a cheesy meme too, again, but I really truly feel like gratitude bridges the gap to peace and contentment. And those things have changed my life. Those are practices that if I was in front of 20 children that external stimuli can't change my self-care. My self-care's strong. I'm a pillar. And you give me 20 kids, all 20 of them throwing blocks and books. Someone's going to call me and ask me to go for a job after this. You give me 20 kids and I'm the happiest human in the entire universe. Doesn't matter to me because all those 20 kids deserve to be loved. Don't call me for a job. No, but that's a gift, to be with 20 kids that need a calm, regulated adult. Like, give them to me. I'll take them. I suppose that's why I had, numerous foster kids in and out of my house. I remember the day that my son came in and sat on my bed, and numerous foster kids, autism, any type of disability. I'll take them. In fact, I remember them calling me for my daughter. She was 9 months old and they wanted me to come to the department to pick her up. I was like, no, I'm good. I think I'm good. And then they said, just come and take her overnight. And I'm like, okay. And she never went home. Yeah. My son sat down on my bed and said, Mom, I can understand finally now why you do this, because we have love covers suffering. Love is the antidote, right? So I'm going to love all the broken ones. I'm going to love them so hard. Love can cover a multitude of that. And my two little ones that were adopted, their lives would be very, very different. But the love of our big, crazy, chaotic family changed their lot. And I look at that as my students too. That love and understanding, empathy is the way that I front my life. So
That's why we connect so well. We are like the same person in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Just on the other side.
Yeah.
Although you'll be a West Coaster soon, right?
I am coming your way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to wrap up, but any one book recommendation that you can give right now? People want to learn more about any of this.
Well, I have two that have kind of been my Bible. The Body Keeps Score.
Great one.
And Help for Billy. I work out of Help for Billy with my students, Children at Risk, Heather Forbes. And those are two that really, are go-to books for me. I read constantly about the brain and things like that, but those two are foundational books for me. They're my Bibles. Noted.
We will link those below. Anything else that you want to share on this?
No, just keep doing the work.
Amazing. And if people want to find out more about you or the work that you're doing or ask you questions about anything, what's the best way that they can find you?
I'm on LinkedIn, Catherine Dennis on LinkedIn. I'm available.
Cool. We're going to skip today's listener question because we answered a lot of questions today, but instead we are going to wrap up with our try it at home tip, which Catherine so graciously gave us. And she said that she recommends that we all try to implement a self-care or self-check-in. Self-care too, but self-check-in. So any moment of the day, you can pair it up with breakfast, lunch, and dinner, when you wake up, when you go to bed, but checking in with yourself, kind of checking your emotional temperature and go back to that balance. So if you feel like you're really low and you're exhausted, what can you do to pick up your energy? If you feel like you're in a really heightened state, what's a slow moving thing that you can do quickly to bring down your energy? Breathing is an amazing one that's free and quick, and we can do it in the moment. But I think that's a beautiful tip to suggest. Is just, we're moving so fast through the day. Slow down, check in with myself. Hi self, where are you? How are you feeling? What can I
What's your affect saying about who you are? What's your affect say?
Yep, your face, your body language. Yeah. So that is it for today's episode of Returning to Us podcast. Remember our try it at home tip to check in with yourself as frequently as possible. And if you would like me to answer a question on a future episode, feel free to email me at podcast@thebehaviorhub.com, or you can send me a text to 717-693-7744. And you can lock in what we talked about today right away. An easy way to do this is to leave a review or leave a comment with your biggest takeaway from today's interview. And don't forget to subscribe to future episodes to learn all the ways to hack your brain. And until next episode, I am Lauren Spiegelmeier, and thanks for joining Catherine and me. And thanks, Catherine, for sharing your genius with us.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for having me.